Most people think being available makes them valuable. They respond quickly. They always say yes. They make time no matter what. And at first it feels right. It feels like effort, like connection, like they're doing things correctly. But over time, something strange happens. The more available they become, the less they're valued. Replies feel slower. Respect feels weaker. Attention starts fading, and they don't understand why. Because value doesn't come from constant presence. It comes from controlled presence. Think about it. Anything that's always available loses weight. If someone knows you'll always respond instantly, always be there, always adjust your time for them, there's no uncertainty, no space, no effort required from them. And without effort, appreciation drops, not intentionally, but naturally. This is where most people go wrong. They try to increase value by giving more attention, more time, more access. But value doesn't grow through overexposure. It grows through selectivity. When you become less available, not in a rude or distant way, but in a controlled, intentional way, something shifts. People start noticing your absence. And absence creates awareness. They begin to realize when you're not there. They start wondering what you're doing. They begin to value the moments when you are present. Because now your attention isn't guaranteed. And when something isn't guaranteed, it becomes meaningful. This isn't about ignoring people or playing games. It's about having priorities. A life that doesn't revolve around every notification. A schedule that isn't constantly adjusted for others. When you operate like that, your time naturally becomes limited, and limited access creates value. Because now, when you choose to engage, it feels intentional. It feels earned. And people respond differently to that. They pay more attention. They listen more carefully. They respect your time more. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior created it. Here's the deeper truth. People don't value what they can always have. They value what they might lose. And the moment your presence stops being automatic, it starts becoming important. To really understand this, you have to look at how people subconsciously assign value. It's not always logical. It's based on patterns, effort, and perception. When something is easy to access, the mind labels it as low priority. Not because it actually is, but because it feels replaceable. If someone knows they can reach you anytime, with no delay, no resistance, no boundaries, they stop treating your presence as something special. It becomes normal, expected, almost invisible. And once something becomes expected, it loses impact. That's why constant availability works against you. Now flip it. When your time is not always accessible, the dynamic changes. If you don't respond instantly, people notice. If you're not always around, people feel it. If your attention isn't guaranteed, people value it more when they get it. Because now, there's effort involved. And effort creates meaning. This is where selective availability comes in. It's not about disappearing. It's about choosing. You don't respond based on impulse. You respond based on priority. You don't say yes automatically. You consider if it aligns. You don't give your time just because it's asked. You give it because it makes sense. And that shift changes how people experience you. They start to feel that your time has weight, that your attention has limits, that your presence is not something they can casually access at any moment. And when people feel limits, they adjust. They become more intentional. They communicate more clearly. They respect your space more, not because you told them to, but because your behavior set the standard. Another important layer is how you handle urgency. Most people react immediately to urgency, even when it's artificial. A message comes in, they reply instantly. A request appears, they feel pressure to say yes. A situation feels time-sensitive, they drop everything. And that pattern trains others to expect instant access. But when you break that pattern, something shifts. You don't rush. You don't respond just because something feels urgent. You take a moment, you decide, and that pause sends a signal. It shows that your time isn't controlled by external demands. It's controlled by you. And that's where value begins to rise. Because now, people understand something important. Access to you is not automatic. It's chosen. The final level of being unavailable is when it stops feeling like a strategy and becomes a natural result of how you live. At the beginning, you might consciously slow down your responses. You might remind yourself not to say yes too quickly. You might hold back from being instantly accessible. But over time, that effort fades. You're not trying to be less available anymore. You just are. Because your life is full. Your focus is directed. Your priorities are clear. You're not waiting for messages. You're not adjusting your schedule for every request. You're not building your day around other people's expectations. And that's where the real shift happens, because now your availability isn't controlled, it's limited by design. And that limitation creates presence. When you do show up, you're fully there. You're not distracted. You're not dividing your attention. You're engaged. And that kind of presence feels different. People notice it immediately because most interactions are diluted. Half attention, half focus, constant distraction. But when someone who is rarely available gives full attention, it feels more valuable, more intentional, more real. And that's what people start associating with you, not absence, but quality. This is where revaluation happens. People stop measuring you by how often you're there. They start measuring you by how you show up when you are. And that's a completely different level of value, because frequency drops, but impact increases. Now here's the deeper truth. When you stop being constantly available, some people will react. They might question you. They might feel the change. They might even try to pull you back into old patterns because they were used to easy access. But this is where most people break. They feel that pressure. And they go back to being overly available just to keep things comfortable. But if you stay consistent, something important happens. People adapt. They adjust to your new standard. They stop expecting instant replies. They stop assuming unlimited access. They start respecting your time because you respected it first. And that's the key. You don't create value by asking for it. You create it by how you operate. When your time is structured, your attention is selective and your presence is intentional. People begin to see you differently, not as someone who is always there, but as someone whose presence matters. And once that shift happens, you're no longer just available. You're valued.